Maybe, I guess. John Balliol is King of Scotland. Wait, what? See, Edward had always wanted Scotland, but Alexander was a good king who was loved by his people. If he'd attempted an invasion earlier, the Scots would have fought tooth and nail to defend their home. But a new king, especially a weak one like John Balliol, could easily be made into a puppet. And that's exactly what Edward set out to do. Balliol was initially pumped to be the king, but Longshanks does not treat him as an equal, and time again, the new Scottish monarch is humiliated in front of his people. Eventually, King Edward demands a draft of local Scotsmen to help him in his war against the French. Balliol realizes that complying would fully admit that Scotland was nothing but a vassal state to England. With nothing left to lose, Balliol does the unthinkable and requests help from the King of France to stand up to King Edward. Word of this alliance reaches Longshanks and he's enraged. A vassal state allying with his greatest enemy could simply not go unpunished, and so he readies his army and begins plans for an invasion into Scotland. John Balliol frantically calls upon his nobles to raise their armies to defend the homeland, but the Bruce family rejects his call. See, the Bruces were all still salty about not being the King of Scotland, and they refused to accept Balliol as their legitimate king. In response, Balliol and his supporters, mainly the Cummins clan, confiscate their lands and later attack the Bruces while they're sheltering in England as revenge for their betrayal. King Edward begins his invasion in 1296, and the Scottish armies can do little to stop him. Longshanks is ruthless, and in March, he storms his army into the town of Berwick and slaughters 17,000 civilians. The following month, his mounted knights go toe-to-toe with the best Scotland has to offer at the Battle of Dunbar, and it's another blowout. Over 100 Scottish knights and nobles are captured, and soon John Balliol is forced to surrender. In a public humiliation ceremony, King Edward rips Balliol's royal garments and leaves him standing naked in front of the crowd. He then steals the sacred Stone of Destiny from Scone that had been used to crown Scottish kings for centuries. Edward officially declares Scotland a province of England and returns home with the Stone of Destiny and his prisoners. With the war for independence seemingly lost, 1,500 Scottish nobles pledged their loyalty to King Edward, and amongst them is the youngest Robert the Bruce, the grandson of Robert the Competitor. Though he shared the same name as his father and grandfather, this Robert was different. Since he was a child, he had drunk the Kool-Aid that the Bruces were the rightful kings of Scotland. He was initially okay sitting and waiting for Edward to make him a vassal king, but soon he grew impatient, and in 1297 he and some other nobles led a revolt against King Edward. But before a single battle, they sign a treaty and he joins the English again. Later that year, a minor noble named William Wallace raises an army of peasants and pulls off an upset victory against the English at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Robert the Bruce sees this as his path to the throne of a renewed independent Scotland, and he switches sides back to the Scottish resistance. But less than a year later, Wallace is soundly defeated by Edward Longshanks at the Battle of Falkirk. Robert the Bruce has made Wallace's successor as one of the guardians of Scotland to lead the resistance, but in a few years, he gives up again, and he slinks back to the English side in 1302. In the span of just 5 years, Robert had flip-flopped 4 times and had pretty much lost the trust of most people in Scotland. His rival John Cummin becomes the face of the Scottish resistance and most likely person to be made king. Despite nothing really going his way and technically being on Team Longshanks again, Robert the Bruce still delusionally believed that he will one day be the king of the Scots, and he secretly begins making alliances with other Scottish nobles. He even strikes a deal with his most hated rival, John Cummin. Little did he know that Cummin also wanted to be king, and he would not waste his opportunity to get rid of a potential rival for good. Cummin tells King Edward about Robert the Bruce's betrayal, and Longshanks immediately sends out orders to capture him. Robert gets word that his cover had been blown, and he takes off in the dark of the night back to Scotland. Enraged by the betrayal, Robert asks John Cummin to meet him at a church to discuss what happened. On February 10, 1306, the rivals for the Scottish throne meet in a chapel in Dumfries, and things get heated quick. "How could you? We had a deal!" screams Robert. His voice echoes throughout the holy building. The two men come to blows, and in the heat of the moment, Robert draws his sword and stabs Cummin, who falls to the ground in front of the altar. 2 of his men quickly rush in and finish the job. John Cummin was dead, and now there was no turning back. With what little support he had left in Scotland in attendance, and without the sacred Stone of Destiny, Robert the Bruce is crowned King of Scotland. At long last, his wish had finally come true, but he would soon learn, heavy is the head that wears the crown. For murdering someone in a church, he's excommunicated by the Pope, and within weeks, King Edward orders his forces in Scotland, led by the Earl of Pembroke, to fly the dragon banner, a clear warning that no quarter would be given to Robert and his men in battle. No prisoners would be taken, and the survivors would be executed. Robert the Bruce finds out about the kill-on-sight orders and travels to Perth to challenge the Earl to battle. "All right, Aymer, I'm here. Let's do this." "It's kind of late, bro. I'll come out and find you tomorrow. We can fight then." Okay. We're just going to camp over there then. Come get us when you're ready." "Psych! We're ready now!" Mounted cavalry rushes into Robert's camp, and they begin hacking his unarmed soldiers to pieces. The army of Robert the Bruce is caught completely off guard, and in the darkness, he scrambles to get his men prepared for battle. He mounts his steed and tries to fight, but he's knocked off and nearly captured 3 times before a small band of loyal men surround him and drag him away. The Earl of Pembroke makes good on the promise of the dragon banner, and nearly the entire Scottish army is killed or captured. Having lost everything, Robert the Bruce runs away with a handful of loyal soldiers to Rathlin Island off the coast of Ireland. Edward wants to send a clear message to the would-be King of the Scots, and soon he begins to hunt down Robert's entire family. 3 of his brothers are executed in brutal fashion. His wife is imprisoned, his 12-year-old daughter is captured and sent to a convent, and his sister is displayed like an animal in a cage hanging from a castle wall. On Rathlin, Robert wanders, lost and depressed. His whole life he had wanted the power, respect, and glory of a king, but now he was a king without a kingdom, an outlaw hiding on an island. He stumbles into a cave one day and slumps against the wall to wallow in self-pity. As he sits dejected, he watches a tiny spider try to spin its web. The creature crawls and attempts to jump from its ledge to the next, but it falls short and helplessly floats to the ground. Robert watches as the spider climbs back up to the same spot and tries again and again, but each time it falls short. Without realizing it, he soon finds himself cheering for the spider as it climbs back up the ledge for another try. The creature pauses for a brief moment, as if doubting itself as it stares at the ledge it had been trying so hard to reach. "Don't give up! Don't give up! You can do it!" The spider launches itself with all its might and soars through the air. This time, it makes it across and quickly begins to spin its web. In that moment, Robert thinks of his own life. Like this spider, he too had his own dreams that he had chased and failed at many times. The only difference was that this spider never gave up. Inspired, Robert thinks that maybe he too could try again to achieve his dream, but this time to chase it differently. This time, he would be a real king, a man not simply given the crown, but one who becomes truly worthy of it. A king who shoulders the burden of his people and lights their darkest hour with hope. He leaves the cave a changed man, and in 1307, Robert the Bruce returns to Scotland. He doesn't have much, just 600 men make up his army, but he's determined to take back his kingdom. Being so heavily outnumbered, Robert adopts guerrilla tactics, hitting the English when they least expect it and running before they can mount a defense. At Loudon Hill, Robert sets a trap and lures the Earl of Pembroke and his army into battle. Despite being outnumbered, Robert and his tiny army emerge victorious, and he claims his first official victory over the English as King of the Scots. Edward hears that Robert the Bruce had returned and sets out to go to battle once again. But on his march north, he contracts dysentery and dies. His son, Edward II, is made King of England, but Junior was nowhere near the man Edward Longshanks was. He's indecisive and would rather have others make difficult decisions for him. Robert gets the news of King Edward's passing, and he realizes this is an opportunity he cannot waste. With his small band of freedom fighters, he relentlessly attacks and reclaims English-held castles, cities, and towns. Over the next 7 years, he works to regain the trust of the people of Scotland as he leads his men into battle again and again. Stories of his bravery spread throughout the land, and slowly his army of a few hundred freedom fighters grows into the thousands. By 1314, he had recaptured almost every single one of the English-held castles in Scotland. Things are now dire for Edward II, as one of his last castles in Scotland, Castle Stirling, capitulates to Robert's brother, and the English forces there agree to surrender if reinforcements do not arrive. Edward realizes he has to do something, so he raises an army of 15,000 men and rushes to Stirling. Robert the Bruce gets word of his movements and is concerned. Though his army had grown, he's still outnumbered over 2 to 1, and he has no heavy cavalry to counter the English war horses. Racing against the clock, he trains his pikemen to use their defensive schiltron formations offensively. It's the best he can do with so little time, and he drills them over and over again. He then scouts the road to the castle and chooses a location for the battle near a stream called the Bannockburn. To ensure the English fight him where he wants them, he sets traps that'll force Edward to engage him on his terms. And then he waits. On June 23, 1314, Robert the Bruce is patrolling the area on a scouting mission, and he watches as the first of the English heavy cavalry begin to emerge in the distance. Amongst the English army is a knight named Henry de Bohun, who spots Robert and instantly recognizes the outlaw king of the Scots. Without hesitation, de Bohun lowers his lance and charges at a full clip towards Robert the Bruce, looking to take him out here and now and claim all the glory of the battle. Robert sees the knight barreling straight at him, and instead of retreating, he draws his axe. The Scots watch in horror as their king takes off directly towards the advancing English knight. They can't bear to watch as the tip of de Bohun's lance gets closer and closer to their king. But at the last second, Robert maneuvers his horse and sidesteps the knight. He rises up on his stirrups and brings his axe crashing down onto the head of Henry de Bohun, splitting his skull in two. Ha ha! Take that, you dirty... Oh no! You broke my favorite axe!
That, you daft.
Why'd you do that?
Didn't do
God,
that.
seriously? This freaking sucks! Oh!
Gumbo.
The sight of their king effortlessly taking out an English knight fills his men with courage, and they bravely fight against the much larger English army. The will of the Scots is unshakable, and they inflict heavy casualties on the better equipped English knights. Shocked, Edward's army pulls back and sets up camp for the night. Later that evening, a soldier from Edward's army defects and makes his way into Robert's camp. Morale in the English army is low. If you fight them tomorrow, you can win. After nearly a decade of fighting what many thought was an unwinnable war, Robert the Bruce had led the Scots to the precipice of their freedom. Despite the good news, the Scottish king knows they were still massively outnumbered, and Edward's heavy cavalry would still be extremely dangerous. With the fate of his people hanging in the balance, he decides to let them have the final word. He turns to his war council and asks, "Shall we fight or not?" His generals shout back in unison, "Fight!"
Oi.
And so the following day, against an army more than twice their size, 6,000 Scotsmen bravely follow their king into battle to win their independence. Robert the Bruce sends his archers out to distract Edward's bowmen, and he quickly marches his pikemen out onto the field. The English knights see this and charge. As the rumbling of the mass of horses draws closer and closer, the Scots shout defiantly and raise their pikes. Wave after wave of English knights are impaled on their spears, and they continue to march forward. Robert sends his light cavalry, and they scatter Edward's archers, giving his schiltrons a clear path forward. Despite their superior numbers and weaponry, the English find themselves pushed back, and soon they're pinned against the Bannockburn stream. With Edward's army trapped, Robert deploys his reserves to deliver the final blow, and the English knights, realizing their king is now in danger, pull him from the battlefield. The English lose 5,000 men, including 1,000 knights and nobles, while Robert's army suffers fewer than 500 casualties.
That's good.
The victory at Bannockburn all but cemented Scottish independence, and after 8 years in captivity, Robert's wife, daughter, and sister are traded for hostages and freed. Robert the Bruce has his excommunication lifted by the Pope, and he's officially recognized by the Church as the true King of Scotland. Though the Pope had forgiven his sins, Robert the Bruce still wondered if he could ever truly be forgiven for the horrible act he had committed in the chapel decades ago. On his deathbed, he asks his good friend Sir James Douglas to take his heart to fight in a crusade so he can be sure his sins were absolved. Robert the Bruce dies just before his 55th birthday, and James Douglas makes good on his promise, wearing his king's heart in a silver casket around his neck while on a crusade to fight the Moors in Spain. While there, he and his fellow Scots are ambushed and find themselves severely outnumbered. As they prepare themselves for battle, Douglas tears Robert's heart from his neck and throws the casket at the advancing army and shouts, "Lead on, brave heart! I will follow thee!"
Guys, stand in the middle. What do you got? Correct what you're doing. But in the middle. Okay. Experiencing interrupt.
It's the year 336 BCE, and on the verge of his greatest conquest, Philip II, the King of Macedonia, is unexpectedly assassinated by one of his most trusted bodyguards. His 20-year-old son inherits not only his conquered lands, but also the most powerful military in the world. Though many at the time doubted the young king, he soon proved to not only be a worthy successor to his father's throne, but also one of, if not the greatest general in the history of mankind. He passes away at the young age of 32, but generations of historians and orators tell tales of his conquests. His bravery and victories against all odds are legendary, and they gave him the name Alexander the Great. But here's the thing about great men in history. Oftentimes, two things can be true at once. Alexander the Great was no doubt one of the most brilliant military minds of all time, but he was also a raging alcoholic, and like other goats, he had a huge chip on his shoulder, and this made him take things very, very personally. Like this time, for example. Number 1, the destruction of Thebes. Shortly after Alexander inherited King Philip's throne, many of the lands his father had conquered began to rebel. Alexander wasted no time traveling to crush these rebellions. But back in Greece, conquered city-states began to wonder if they too could regain their independence from the Macedonians. Cities like Athens dipped their toes into the inviting pool of independence, but no one in Greece shot their shot harder than the people of Thebes. See, the Thebans saw Philip's death as their chance to finally regain their freedom. Philip was a scary dude, but his son? He was only 20, young and untested. If there was ever a time to fight back, it's now. They began sending out passionate calls for help to other Greek cities, trying to rally a united Greek army to drive out the Macedonians. The Thebans then started killing or arresting any Macedonian supporters they could find in their city and began stockpiling weapons. While away handling his business up north, Alexander hears what the Thebans are up to and makes a beeline back to Greece, covering an incredible distance in just 13 days. And so, on a morning in early September of 335 BCE, the Thebans are shocked to find Alexander and his army positioned right outside of their city walls. Initially, Alexander tried to be reasonable. Okay guys, I know all of you can't be guilty, so just hand over the troublemakers and we're good. Okay, sure, we'll give them all up as soon as you hand yourself over to us, you fucking barbarian. Sick bird, bro. Look at me, I'm Philip. Kill them all. Now, back in this day, aside from a few notable exceptions, Greek city-states were generally left unharmed during wars.
Oh my god.
Thebes, in particular, had existed for over 1,500 years, but Alexander orders his men to siege the city. The Thebans remained inside the city walls, confident that they had a good shot at pulling off this upset. See, when Alexander was away, they secretly made a pact with Athens to work together to fight against the Macedonians. But when Alexander showed up in Greece, the Athenians got cold feet and ghosted, leaving the Thebans to fight all alone. Realizing the Athenians were not coming to their rescue, the Thebans decide to march out of the city and fight Alexander head-on before they're weakened by starvation. Fighting not only for their freedom, but for the lives of their wives and children inside the city, the Thebans go toe-to-toe against the mighty Macedonian army. No one is able to gain an edge, and the stalemate drags on, until Alexander learns of an undefended gate. He sends a unit into the city, and when the Thebans learn that their loved ones are being terrorized, they break formation and are forced to retreat to fight within the city. The famous Theban cavalry made their last stand in the agora, but by sunset, the plaza's fountains ran red with blood. The survivors, men, women, and children, were herded like cattle into holding pens. And here, Alexander, calmed down a bit, but not really, tries to be diplomatic. He assembles representatives from the smaller Greek cities surrounding Thebes to vote on the fate of the city and its people. But here's the thing. The Thebans had bullied these smaller cities around them for centuries, so unsurprisingly, they all vote for Alexander to tear it all down. The Macedonian army sweeps through the streets of Thebes. Block by block, house by house, they tore the city apart. Soldiers systematically moved through the neighborhoods with torches, creating fires so intense that the marble buildings cracked and exploded, and the great walls, which had stood for centuries, were pulled down stone by stone until they were nothing but rubble. Merchants from as far as Carthage and Egypt arrived within days, and every one of the 30,000 surviving citizens of Thebes were sold off into slavery. Other Greek cities like Athens looked at the smoking ruins of Thebes and are horrified at the total destruction of the once great city. They all find their loyalty real quick, and Alexander's now free to carry out his father's mission of conquering Persia. Number 2, Blightus the Black. It's 334 BCE, and Alexander's leading his first major invasion into Achaemenid Persian territory, and at the Battle of Granicus, the fighting is intense. Clytus. Let us show them how it's done. Yes, my king.
Yes, my
This
king.
epic fight is brought to you by Raycon.
Oh no.
Don't try to make y'all comfortable.
Okay, now it's...
For the record, lab on me going all the way. For the record, ain't trying to link no time to waste. For the record. For the record. Yeah. For the record.
As you can see, these earbuds are awesome. I personally use them when I'm slaying your greatest foes. No, like working out or running errands around town. Oh, I
like
guess it
this
would work
part.
for
I
that
like
too.
them.
But they're also good for drowning out the screams of your mortal enemies. Right. Well, you can get your own set. Go to buyraycon.com/serioushistory to get 20% off the everyday earbuds they're wearing. What? I
Hey.
thought I heard you say 20% off. That's right. Raycon's offering 20% off their everyday earbuds when you go to buyraycon.com/serioushistory.
Go
That's
into
really cool.
raycon.com.
Thank you again, Raycon, for sponsoring this fight. I mean, video. Anyways, Alexander, as always, is leading from the front lines. With his white plumed helmet, he's easy to spot, which you would think would make him an easy target, but he's a fierce and skilled warrior and strikes down soldier after soldier who dares to engage him. But after thrusting his blade into the next unlucky Persian NPC, his sword gets stuck, lodged in the dead man's armor. While struggling to remove his sword, a Persian commander sees his opening and charges at Alexander
Didn't he die
from behind, swinging his
poisoning,
axe with
if I
evil
remember
intent.
correctly? I'm
Just
wrong.
as the axe was about to
thought he
cleave
died.
Alexander's head into two, one of his father's trusted generals, a man named Clytus the Black, thrusts his spear through the Persian's chest, saving the young king's life just in the nick of time. The would-be
Actually
killer
cut off
topples
his arm.
sideways into the bloody river, his axe falling harmlessly beside him. After saving his life, Clytus becomes one of Alexander's most trusted commanders and was known for two things: his unwavering loyalty and his brutal honesty. While Alexander's court was filled with yes-men who would kiss his ass all day long, Clytus was different. He'd tell Alexander exactly what he thought, and Alexander actually respected this about
The
him,
wild
at
patron appears
least
captured
until he
using
didn't.
Toad catch.
See, in
Winners revealed
328
90s.
BCE, Alexander's in Marakanda, modern-day Samarkand in Uzbekistan. He's already conquered half the known world, and as a thank you to Clytus,
Adam.
he rewards him by making him the satrap of an area called Bactria. Now, being a satrap wasn't some minor position. It meant you were basically a governor of an entire region. But Clytus wasn't happy about this quote-unquote promotion. He saw this as
Yep.
exactly the opposite, as he would be far away from the king and be forgotten. On top of this, the Macedonian veterans who had followed Alexander across the world watched as their king slowly transforms into something they didn't recognize. As he conquered Persian lands, Alexander began to adopt Persian customs, wear Persian clothes, and act more like a Persian king than a Macedonian one. To old-school Macedonians
I'm
like
back.
Clytus, this was repulsive, and the growing resentment of all this Persian bullshit and the humiliating new assignment explodes at a feast in 328 BCE. The feast at Marakanda started like any other. Wine flowed freely, and as usual, Alexander began bragging and praising his own achievements, comparing himself to heroes like Hercules,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
talking
he
about
died
how
while he
he's
was
already done
drunk,
more than
though.
his father Philip ever did. The room filled with the sounds of yes-men clapping and nodding along to every word, while Clytus
Sounds like my
quietly
work.
attempts to drink his resentment away. And it's at this point Alexander announces he has new assignments for his most loyal of generals. Clytus, my friend, you are to take these defeated Greek mercenaries who we just beat and go to fight...
Patron escaped. No one caught it.
I don't know, like those annoying nomads on the steppe or something, I guess. This assignment was the ultimate insult to Clytus. He had saved Alexander's life, served him and his father
sorry.
loyally, and now he was being banished to the steppe with a bunch of Greek losers? His pride could take no further injury, and he stands and shouts, "Are these the words of the son of Zeus? Every victory was won by Macedonian blood. But look at you. You dress like a Persian." Holy shit. The room goes dead silent. Even drunk, everyone knows this is bad, and Alexander's face boils red. Clytus continues to pop off, bringing up Alexander's dad and how ashamed he would be, and then complaining about his assignment, each word more bitter than the last. Alexander's now so pissed, he grabs an apple from the table and throws it at Clytus's head. He begins to storm towards Alexander, ready to fight. The other officers restrain him and drag him from the hall, kicking and screaming. his voice trailing off as he's carried away. Crisis averted, Alexander's given a brief moment to collect himself. Okay, now, before I was
Get
so
that,
rudely
dude.
interrupted, you, my dear friend Perdiccas, you will... And one more thing. Your dad was way cooler than you. Yeah, boy! That's it. Alexander grabs a spear from one of his guards, and before anyone could react, he drives it through Clytus's heart, killing him
Oh my
instantly. The second Clytus hits the ground, Alexander sobers up real quick. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander stood there, watching his friend's blood pool on the floor. The man who had saved his life at Granicus, who had served him faithfully for years, was dead by his own hand. He tries to turn the spear on himself, but his guards stop him, and for 3 days he stays in his tent, refusing to eat or drink, crying and screaming that he's become a murderer like the barbarians he conquered. The ancient sources tell us Alexander deeply regretted killing Clytus, but the damage to his reputation as a fair and balanced ruler was done, and regret couldn't bring back his dearest friend. Number 3, the Tyre Land Bridge. It's 332 BCE, and at this point, Alexander was basically unstoppable. In just 2 years, he'd steamrolled through Asia Minor, crushed the Persians at Granicus and Issus, and turned the entire Mediterranean coastline into Macedonian territory. Well, almost the entire coastline, I guess, except for a city called Tyre. See, Tyre was a heavily fortified island fortress half a mile offshore of modern-day Lebanon, and they politely told him to f*** off. Protected by 150-foot walls and the Mediterranean Sea itself, Tyre had never fallen to siege in its entire history. When Alexander rolled up on the city, he said he wished to leave an offering at the Temple of Melkart that he'd heard was there. The Tyrians refused, and this turned out to be a huge mistake, because you see, Alexander was a huge Hercules fanboy, and Melkart, he had heard, was the Phoenician equivalent of Hercules. Being denied an opportunity to fanboy out was insulting. Alexander took this no very, very personally. So he decided Tyre needed to be taught a lesson, which led him to going full Minecraft. Alexander ordered his men to build a massive land bridge of stone and sand straight through the sea to reach the island. The Tyrians watched from their walls, at first laughing at a distance as they watched Alexander's army hopelessly dumping sand and stone into the ocean. But they soon started freaking out as Alexander's bridge got closer and closer. At a certain point, the people in Tyre realized that this lunatic might actually reach them, so they sent divers to mess with the bridge's foundations and launched counterattacks from their walls. They loaded up old horse transport ships with cedar wood, pitch, sulfur, and whatever else would burn, setting them on fire and sending them straight into Alexander's construction project. As hard as they tried, nothing seemed to work, and the bridge got closer and closer every day. But just as Alexander's bridge was nearly complete, nature itself seemed to join Tyre's side. A storm hit and destroyed a large part of the bridge. Then a whale, not making this up, got stuck in the construction debris and caused delays. But even nature could not defeat Alexander, and he rebuilt the bridge, made it wider, and added wooden towers with giant crossbows on top. Before long, his half-mile bridge to Tyre was complete. The bridge took 8 months to finish, and Alexander's patience had run out. When the rams finally cracked the city walls, his men poured through like a tide of vengeance. He ordered his navy to surround the island and sink any ship that tried to flee. The Macedonians enter the city and ruthlessly slaughter 8,000 Tyrians. The survivors soon wished they'd died in the initial slaughter, as Alexander ordered 2,000 men dragged to the beach and crucified along the shore. The entire surviving population of 30,000 people were then sold into slavery. The only ones spared were those who sought sanctuary in the Temple of Melkart, the same temple Alexander wanted to visit in the first place. Now, building a half-mile land bridge because you felt insulted is pretty insane. But to me, the craziest thing is that this land bridge Alexander built is still there today over 2,000 years later. He literally changed the geography of the Lebanese coast forever because someone told him no. Number 4, Betis. So after Tyre, Alexander steamrolls through the Persian Empire and is heading to Egypt when he hits a speed bump called Gaza. During this time, Gaza was an ancient fortress city perched on a massive hilltop that controlled the only road between Syria and Egypt. By this time, cities in the area had begun to surrender peacefully when they saw Alexander and his army approaching. But Gaza was different. It was commanded by a man named Betis, who had zero intention of letting Alexander just stroll through. See, the Persians stationed at Gaza weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were veterans who'd sworn blood oaths to protect this gateway to Egypt, and whose fathers and grandfathers had held this same wall. "Let the boy king come," they said. "Our ancestors didn't bow to Xerxes himself. We sure as hell won't bow to some Macedonian pup." And of course, Alexander did not like this one bit. And just like the troublemakers at Tyre, the people of Gaza and Betis in particular were about to find out what happens when Alexander the Great feels disrespected. Knowing that Minecraft is now an option, Alexander orders his men to create a giant dirt ramp to breach the walls of Gaza. His men begin hauling dirt and piling it near the city walls, the whole time dodging flaming arrows and boiling oil from the defenders. This went on for months, until a lucky Persian hit Alexander with a bolt that punched through his shield and buried itself in his shoulder, leaving him with one arm but twice the rage. When Alexander's ramp finally topped the walls of Gaza, Alexander led his men into the city. Unafraid, Betis' soldiers charge and meet the invaders head-on. The fighting is intense, hand-to-hand and on every street, but the soldiers of Gaza are ultimately no match for the Macedonian army. Though they know they have no hope of victory, not one soldier surrenders, and they die fighting or are captured. Following the battle, the citizens of the city are gathered and sold into slavery. Betis fights until the end, and he's amazingly captured alive. He's brought to Alexander, but instead of groveling, he stands in silence. By this time, Alexander had become fond of the Persian customs of people bowing to their emperor, and he took this lack of bowing from Betis personally. He's there sneering at Betis as he stands proudly in defiance, but then realizes that this governor of Gaza may help him live out one of his childhood fantasies. See, as we know from Tyre, Alexander liked Hercules, but Achilles was his all-time Greek goat. He slept with a copy of the Iliad under his pillow and frequently visited Troy to leave offerings at Achilles' tomb. His life goal was to prove to the world he was just as great as his hero. Having read the Iliad countless times, Alexander recalls the climactic battle between Achilles, the champion of Greece, and Hector, the greatest warrior of Troy. The story goes, fueled by rage for the killing of his best friend, Achilles defeats Hector and drags his dead body from a chariot as revenge. Alexander looks at Betis and smiles. He orders his men to get his chariot and then orders bronze rings driven through Betis' ankles, which are then fastened to said chariot. Once preparations are complete, Alexander gets in, looks back at Betis, and cracks the reins. The horses break out into a full-blown charge, and Alexander giddily does laps around the city walls, with Betis being dragged along behind him. The whole time, Alexander's trying his best to look cool, just like Achilles.
My God, did I get the point?
He can't really contain his excitement. Guys, look at me! I'm Achilles! Yeah, boy! Alexander had missed one minor detail in his reenactment, though. See, in the Iliad, Hector was already dead when Achilles started dragging him around. Betis, on the other hand, was still alive. Ironic, because the whole point of that story was about the futility of revenge and the importance of mercy. But, oh well, Betis was dead by the end of Alexander's bumpy ride, so same ending, I guess.
I missed the end.
It's February 1815, and on a small island just off the coast of Italy, Napoleon is staring longingly at the continent he once ruled in the distance. Just a year ago, he'd controlled more of Europe than any man since the height of the Roman Empire. As the Emperor of France, he'd conquered nearly the entire continent. But now, his empire was reduced to 2 tiny Mediterranean islands, his subjects little more than goats and fishermen. It had taken the combined forces of literally every European nation and a major assist from Mother Nature before Napoleon was finally defeated in the War of the Sixth Coalition. To prevent him from becoming a martyr, the great powers chose to exile Napoleon to the tiny island of Elba to live out the rest of his days. He'd be cut off from his people, and he would be given the ultimate punishment for a man of such ambition. He would be forced to helplessly watch as Europe moved on without him. Upon arriving on Elba, Napoleon had initially resigned himself to his fate and simply planned to improve the island and make it his new home. But soon, he begins to receive letters from supporters that make it sound like Europe's having a lot more trouble moving on than they expected. The great powers of the coalition who defeated him have gathered at the Congress of Vienna and are trying to put Europe back together. But without their common enemy, they've begun to turn on each other and squabble over who gets what after beating Napoleon. Meanwhile, back in France, the coalition had placed a new king, Louis XVIII, on the throne. But he quickly becomes unpopular by reminding everyone why they got rid of their king in the first place. He's out of touch, and the soldiers who are now not being paid begin to look back fondly on the days when Napoleon ruled. Letters pour into Elba, telling Napoleon that if he were to return, the people of France would welcome him with open arms. So, as he watches the sun set, Napoleon quietly decides to once again change the course of history. He orders the repair of his ship, the Inconstant, and in the dark of night on Sunday, February 26, 1815, Napoleon and 1,000 of his most loyal soldiers leave Elba and set sail for the European coast. The Corsican monster, the nightmare that had terrorized Europe for nearly 2 decades, is en route back to France. On March 7th, Metternich, the acting head of the Congress of Vienna, is awakened in the middle of the night with an urgent message from Elba. Upon hearing the report, a chill runs down his spine. Napoleon is missing. Within the hour, he gathers the leaders of Europe together and shares the news, and the Congress of Vienna immediately falls into chaos. Everyone begins to panic and point fingers at each other. The English are blamed for letting him escape, the French for not providing Napoleon's promised allowance, the Russians are considered as potential turncoats. But in the end, it does not matter. The greatest threat to Europe has returned, and all they can do is prepare for war. On March 1st, Napoleon sets foot onto French soil for the first time in 300 days and begins his march to Paris. The king orders the 5th Regiment to find Napoleon and stop him, using lethal force if necessary. They meet just outside of the town of Grenoble, and the 5th stands in formation on the road, blocking the emperor's path. Napoleon's guard ready their weapons, and the two armies size each other up. The king's soldiers stare down the barrels of their guns, locked on the man who had ruled them all less than a year ago. Napoleon steps forward, holds out his arms, and shouts, "Here I am! Kill your emperor, if you wish!" Nobody moves, and the silence is deafening. The men on both sides stand nervously with their weapons at the ready. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, a member of the 5th Regiment lowers his rifle. One by one, the French soldiers follow his lead. Someone in formation shouts out, "Long live the Emperor!" And this call is quickly answered with a resounding reply from every soldier on both sides of the standoff.
Another day, another
"Long live the Emperor!" They all shout in unison. The 5th Regiment throws down their weapons and rush to Napoleon with arms raised victoriously in the air. They shake hands with Napoleon's guard, and together they all celebrate his long-awaited return. Napoleon's now larger rebel army continued its march to Paris. Over the next 20 days, 12,000 more soldiers would be sent out by King Louis to capture Napoleon, and they would all immediately defect to join him. As the news spreads throughout Europe, the Congress of Vienna realizes they must put aside their differences and again work together if an independent Europe is to survive. On Monday, March 13th, Napoleon is declared an outlaw by the nations of Austria, Great Britain, Prussia, and Russia. With more and more of the French army defecting to the former emperor, King Louis runs away to Belgium, and on March 20th, just 20 days after his arrival, Napoleon marches into Paris unopposed. The city erupts into celebration. He retakes the throne without firing a single bullet. The emperor has returned. Oh my God! The emperor has returned!
Oh, I can't believe you've done that.
On March 25th, the Congress of Vienna ratified the Treaty of Alliance against Napoleon. Each of the 4 great powers promised 150,000 men for the fight. No more half measures. Napoleon must be defeated decisively once and for all, and they begin to draw up plans for a July 1st invasion of France. 2 European armies are quickly assembled in Belgium near the French border to defend against a possible invasion.
No one caught it.
A British army is led by Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, who commands a ragtag group of 92,000 Dutch, English, and German troops, and a Prussian army that's led by Marshal von Blücher with around 121,000 Prussian soldiers. Both commanders are hardened veterans of the Napoleonic Wars. They know their enemy, and they're trusted with the unenviable task of holding off the emperor as long as possible to give the rest of the coalition time to rally their armies. Back in France, Napoleon's quickly put together a new French army of 124,000 troops. He hears of the planned Allied invasion and of the 2 armies already stationed in Belgium. He realizes he must quickly make a choice. He can continue to rebuild his army and defend against the coming invasion, or he can go on the offense and knock out the English and Prussian armies
missed
now.
like everything.
If he destroys both armies,
Missed
there's a
everything
chance
again.
he can force the coalition into a peace treaty where he remains the ruler of France. And so he chooses to go on the offense and strike now. Napoleon knows a combined British and Prussian army would outnumber his men 2-1, but he has a plan. The two Allied armies are still separated. If he moves quickly, he can drive his army in between them, cut them off from each other, and take them out one at a time. But this plan means he must move immediately. If he delays any further, Wellington and
Oi,
Blucher
mate.
will coordinate and fortify their positions together. So Napoleon takes his army and boldly crosses the border into Belgium on June 15th. And then I said, well, the drugstore ran out of you. Wait, shh. I thought I heard something.
King Raycon.
He's Napoleon, and they have Raycons!
Hit the scene and it's all
Not
green.
again, man.
On go, we ain't never doing small things. Being fitted for the crown, cause we all kings. If you know you got to shine, let them people know it's time for the show. Hit the scene and it's all green. On go, we ain't never doing small things. Being fitted for the crown, cause we all kings. If you know you got to shine, let them people know it's time for the show.
With a 32-hour battery life and a quick charge function that gives you 90 minutes of power in just 10 minutes, Raycon's latest model is better than ever. Oh, why didn't you warn us?
2.5 minutes.
Sorry about that.
Come on,
Anyways,
Natsu.
with Father's Day coming up, the everyday earbuds would make the perfect gift for Dad. You'll
Yep.
get premium quality sound at half the price of the other guys. I love mine and use them when I'm going to the gym, going on walks, or when I'm in any other noisy place where I need to block out background noise to lock in. Right now, Serious History fans can click the link in the description below or go to buyraycon.com/serioushistory to get 15% off site-wide on all Raycon products. Thanks, Raycon, for helping us make this video. Now watch us steamroll these guys. The Prussians are the first to encounter Napoleon's men and are shocked at his speed of movement. They try to hold them back, but they are unprepared and ultimately
so
fail. The British are warned, and the Duke of Wellington and Blucher quickly
Jakalandik.
begin their preparations for their
Pronounced it
inevitable
wrong.
date with the Demon of France. They both know from experience that Napoleon will not give them time to prepare. Within 24 hours, they'll be forced once again into
Oi,
battle against
my
the greatest general of their lifetime. The next day, Napoleon makes his move. He divides his men and places half his army under the command of the man he had called the bravest of the brave, Field Marshal Michel Ney, and gives him orders to capture the British held
Who's
town of
back?
Quatre Bras. At the
Back
same
here
time,
again.
he personally takes the remainder of his men and marches toward the small village of Ligny
Aye,
to
that was
engage the
mouthful.
Prussians. With lightning speed, Napoleon moves his men into position and waits. At 2:30 p.m., he finally hears cannon fire coming from Quatre Bras. Ney has begun his assault, so in turn, he gives the command to attack. French cannons open fire on the Prussians, and his troops rush into battle. Fighting engulfs the streets of Ligny. Homes and buildings are quickly stormed and used as defensive positions. The townspeople trapped in the crossfire can do nothing but cover their eyes and ears and hold their children close as carnage erupts all around them. The
Never gonna
Prussians
finish
fight
this game,
bitterly,
right?
but Napoleon's army is like an unstoppable force of nature. By the end of the day, 16,000 Prussian soldiers are dead, and those still alive are forced to retreat. Blucher is nearly
Yo,
killed in the
friend.
battle after his horse is shot out from under him, but he somehow survives. And can
What
I
is
just
wrong with
stop
me?
here for just a second and point out that Blucher was 72 years old at this battle? He's literally a grandpa out there leading cavalry charges against the world's
can't aim
greatest
for shit.
general. What a Chad! Anyway, Blucher's generals push for a full retreat, but he refuses. He must remain close to help the Duke of Wellington when the time comes. This he had promised. So instead, he regroups his army to the north just 18 miles away. He'll risk the lives of all of his men to keep his word. At Quatre Bras, Ney has less luck against the British. He had hesitated, and this delay had allowed his enemy time to
Aye,
fully
finally I got
fortify
one.
their positions. He has more men, but they're now running straight into
Cost
heavy
20 million
defensive
a
fire,
turn.
and wave after wave of
That's it.
his soldiers die trying to take the town. As the sun sets, the Duke of Wellington's forces have successfully stopped Ney's advance. In the cover of night, the British safely retreat to Waterloo, while a disgruntled
Yeah.
Marshal Ney slinks back to Napoleon.
Waterloo.
Now, Ney had failed to crush the British forces at Quatre Bras, but he did manage to keep them separated from the Prussians. Phase 1 of Napoleon's plan had still worked, and they can now use the full power of the French army to crush each of their enemies one at a time. But Napoleon receives a report that some of the Prussians are still nearby. If they reach the British and combine their forces, the battle will become much more difficult. He cannot allow this to happen. So he draws up plans to attack Wellington immediately. He will crush the British army before Blücher and the Prussians have any hope of saving them. The fate of Europe will come down to a race against time. And this final decisive battle will happen on Sunday, June 18th, 1815, at a place called Waterloo. Following Quatre Bras, the Duke of Wellington and his men scrambled to fortify defensive positions near a ridge in an area just south of a tiny village called Waterloo. His army is a ragtag group of inexperienced Germans, Dutch, and Belgian soldiers who have joined his elite British troops. In response to the news of Napoleon's return, they were assembled at the last minute by the coalition. It was the best they could do with such limited time, and this army of green recruits is all Wellington has to work with to try to stop the world's greatest general and his army of seasoned veterans. They turned 3 farmhouses into makeshift forts. Hougoumont to the right, La Haye Sainte to the center, and Papillote to the left. Each one is filled with elite British troops. Blücher sends word to Wellington that they're coming to join him in battle, but they are still hours away. The British will be on their own until their arrival, but if they can hold on, they can win. After Ligny, Napoleon assumes the main Prussian force has been neutralized, buying him more than enough time to finish off Wellington and his men.
Sorry, what is
but just as a precaution, he sends out a third of his army to find the remaining Prussian units and wipe them out before they can join up with Wellington. The night of June 17th is an uneasy one for everyone. As if mourning the death and destruction to come, the skies open up and a thunderstorm soaks the ground overnight. The sky is clear by morning, but much of the land between Napoleon's position and the British fortifications has been turned into a thick sea of mud. Napoleon, who wanted to attack at 9 a.m., now waits hours for the sun to dry the ground before he begins his advance towards the British position. No matter, he's still confident that the Prussians are broken and his men will wipe the inexperienced British out in no time. On their arrival at the battlefield, the French soldiers disperse into their proper formations, and finally, at 11 a.m., Napoleon gives the signal. His men launch their first attack to the right on Hougoumont. Cannon fire breaks the silence of the midday as French troops storm the farmhouse. The plan is to force Wellington's hand and make him take troops from his center formation to reinforce his right. But the Allied troops at Hougoumont fight back with everything they got, and Napoleon's men begin to take heavy losses as they approach the farmhouse. Wellington calmly observes from a distance, and he does not commit any further reinforcements from his center. Napoleon's first move has been countered, so he answers with increased violence. At noon, Napoleon sends a volley of cannon fire at the English center and sends his troops to take La Haye Sainte. The Allied forces grip their bayonets and watch as the French column of death slowly marches towards them, their steps shaking the ground as they scream, "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the Emperor!" Napoleon's forces charge the position and the fighting quickly devolves into violence at a horrific scale. Bayonets and fists become the weapons of last resort as the defenders close ranks. The British are pushed back further and further until Wellington finally counterpunches by sending his elite cavalry into the fray. They smash into the French infantry and they begin to scatter. Filled with confidence, the horse riders follow in hot pursuit, easily cutting down French soldiers as they retreat. But in their excitement, the British cavalry overextend themselves and ride into range of Napoleon's cannons. A brutal cannon barrage.
Alright, I think my... Oh. So... Let me just check. Mm. Oh, trade him. Was it Penguinox? I raided last time.
Good.
But I have to double check.
What's the stats? Okay. I like the stats too.
Alright.
The challenge will be to evolve this little stone guy.
Give him a raid.
But we'll figure it out.
It was our last time,
Friendship at
so
36.
some love. He's playing Digimon. I will peace out. All right, take it easy. Have a good day. Bye bye.